Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Influencer Show, where I interview people who can help influence the way you live life in a number of different ways. I'm your host, T7, and today we have a very special guest with us. Today, we have Uncle Malik. So, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the listeners and let them know a little bit about you.
I would, kind sir. Thank you, first of all, Sean, and it's a pleasure to be on your platform. I guess the listeners and viewers will ascertain by now that we have a personal relationship, hence why the term uncle came in. Yes, Sean is my dear and honored nephew. However, in this capacity, I am Malik Muhammad. I help influence and inspire people to cultivate their visions in a specific time. This work is done, Sean, through my work as an empowerment specialist. I'm an empowerment consultant, an empowerment strategist consultant, whichever of the titles you prefer. And what my team and I do is we travel the world and we work with organizations, with governments, we work in the prison system, we work in schools, we work in universities, we work with individuals. And we have a program for early years. So our empowerment master system works from early years through to persons who are retiring. And we simply believe in empowerment. That, in essence, Sean, is what I do and what we do.
That is great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Now, I'd like you to share with the listeners why you do what you do.
Why? When I was much younger, Sean, I had some really important people who influenced my life. And I was told from a very young age that I had the power of being able to speak clearly in terms of my involvement in speech and drama in high school. And one of my very important teachers, Miss Marcia Hilton, she inspired in me the love for language and the love for communication. So the reason why I do what I do now is that I'm simply returning in the past few years, Sean, to what I was born to do, what I love doing, and what I clearly do well. This is my reason. The spark came from a teacher who believed in me when I didn't necessarily believe in myself. And now I have the courage and the confidence and the conviction at this time to do what I do. This is why I do it, Sean.
That's really powerful. So, what would you say has been the biggest influence on you that you wish you had known sooner?
The biggest influence I wish I'd known sooner. Looking back, Sean, I would tell my younger self to follow your guts. Trust your instincts, no deviation. In essence, if I could go back in time, in mathematics, because I know that you are science orientated, the quickest point between 2 points, the quickest way to get between 2 points is a straight line. And so if I had simply stayed in that trajectory of my life, i.e., I knew then what I was born to do, I allowed myself to become distracted. So I would say to my younger self, stay on your path. No deviations, no distractions. Very much what you're doing now, Sean, whereby you are clearly focused, and I love and admire you for that.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
So can you please share with the listeners how you prefer to influence others to change the way they live life for the better?
How? Primarily through the Empowerment Master System that we have at malikmuhammad.com. And this is made up of 8 principles. Now, these 8 principles were derived from studying over 2 years people of influence and successful people in many walks of life, Sean, and various industries. And what I did was I created a graph whereby I realized that of the pool that I looked at, of the some 80 to 85 persons, after I looked at their skill set, and their level of achievements, I was able to deduce mathematically that they had certain core values in common, Trayshawn.
Yeah.
And so we took those 8 values, coined them, worded them, branded them, and came up with the 8 principles of self-empowerment. That's the primary way in which I and we do what we do. The second way, Trayshawn, is through example. I try to embody my brand. And so on a daily basis, I have certain routines, the way I eat, the way I interact with persons, the way I'm on your platform now and learning from you. Because as Stephen R. Covey says in his fantastic book, interdependence is a higher value than independence. And so being on your platform now, I'm able to learn from your world because, Trayshawn, when I was your age, computers weren't available because they weren't in existence yet. And so not that I am some sage a la Moses or as old as Methuselah, but the point is, I know that in this time, it's very important for me to connect with you and your world. And you know personally that I learn from you and admire your drive and your passion and your focus. And so this level of interdependence is essential, not only to my brand, but to being a more effective and relevant tool in this time. And so I try to be a vehicle for empowerment. I aim to embody that. The journey and the struggle sometimes is very difficult. And so I have rituals, I have good people in my life, and I strive each day to be better empowerment. And this, Trayshawn, is what we do and share with the world. That's our unique selling point. That's our niche, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. That's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. You guys have gained quite a bit from that, really. So now I'd like to ask you how. So looking back on now, what advice would you give to your younger self as on top of what you've already said?
Yes. I would suggest or say to myself, follow your passions. What I am naturally good at, follow that through. Because all of us, and your listeners and viewers will identify with this, Trayshawn, all of us have one thing that we do very well. All of us have one area of interest. All we have to do is focus on that one thing, cultivate mastery in that area, then monetize it. If we look at all of the famous people in this world, we know a Prince or a Michael Jackson or a Drake or a Nicki Minaj or a Neil deGrasse Tyson. We know these persons based on an area of expertise. What they have is a reflection of what we have internally. And so I would say to my younger self, identify your passion and trust your gut. Step into the unknown based on that one thing, because that's all you really need in this life. The second thing I would say, Trayshawn, is to really appreciate the support and love that we have around us. Sometimes we tend to become arrogant within ourselves and forget that we aren't where we are now because of ourselves. As a matter of fact, it's because of the supports of somebody who prayed for us, the aunt who gave us £10 to go to school, the uncle or the sibling who helped us with homework, the grandmother who was not necessarily as intelligent or academically bright as we are, but they looked out for us. So the second thing I would tell my younger self is to always appreciate the love that is around you and never take it for granted, because no man or woman is an island and all of us need support and help. So we should really appreciate that in real time.
Definitely.
Those two things I suggest.
That's a lot to. That's a huge amount of impact just in one answer. I hope you guys have gained a lot of golden nuggets from Uncle Malik so far. So now I'd like to ask you, what would you say people should do to stay motivated during moments of crisis?
Right. The world goes through many changes. And I would suggest that the first thing we should do is to look within ourselves and around ourselves. It's very easy, Trayshawn, to look at what we do not have rather than appreciating what we have right now. So, for instance, as a younger person, you may long for the day when you own a car, but right now, you have an Oyster card. You can travel around. Right now, you have legs. Use them and walk.
Yeah.
Right now, you are able to have 10 or 20 pounds or 200 or 30 pounds. Use what you have to get what you want. Build on where you are right now. And so in times of crisis, the first thing to do is to be grateful. Live in gratitude for what you do have. The second thing is to realize that even in challenging times, there are opportunities.
Yeah.
During World War II, Trayshawn, after World War II, someone looked around and saw all of the empty buildings that were bombed and the spaces in and around London and decided, where will people park their cars?
Yeah.
NCP car park came about. Now, if you drive or travel anywhere in the United Kingdom, from where we are speaking now, you have car parks where you pay to simply park your vehicle.
Yes.
Out of devastation came opportunity. I think that we have to see the opportunity in times like now. For instance, if you are on the stock market, there are periods, as you know, Trayshawn, as you have taught me, there are periods when stock go down. But this is but for a time and a season if you look at the factors that may be influencing that stock price. So the stock may be tumbling. If you study what you're doing and master your craft, you can see an opportunity where others would see doom and gloom. So I would strongly suggest that we look at the opportunities that are available in times of crisis. And the third thing I would suggest is to look after yourself. Why would you abuse the temple, i.e., our bodies, that will be the vehicle for us to gain the productivity and experience the good things that we want in this life? And so, if we enjoy soda, we know it's full of sugar. So, even if you had soda every day, 4 or 5 days a week, cutting down to 3 or 4 days is progress. What we're doing here is we have to strengthen our immune systems. We have to look after our bodies, look after our minds, because we want to be successful. And many of your viewers have great plans for the future, Trayshawn. Many of them are not as chronologically advanced as I am at this point in time. Very few of them may have wonderful gray beards or peppercorn beards. And as a result, they have a passion for life. You have a way of seeing the world which is not limited in the same way, for example, that my generation was. And so I would suggest, look at what you have at your disposal right now and move quickly and speedily and efficiently and passionately on what you desire in your mind. Because there are great minds, and as we know, thoughts are electricity. So the minute the thought enters your mind, it may be ricocheting somewhere else in the world. So act now, waste no time. That's what I would suggest in answering that question, Trayshawn.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, we give thanks. It's an honor to be
here. Thank you. And I hope that you guys have definitely gained a lot so far. And the main point that keeps on coming across today is just to take action and make sure that you work with what you have, no matter how little it may be. So, absolutely. Uncle Malik, I'd like to ask you, what is your passion and end goals?
I enjoy being the best version of myself, Trayshawn. I guess this is something that comes with time and with age also. And something that I believe for your audience, the sooner you take on board this tip and this suggestion, the more productive your life will be. Embrace all that you are right now. Love who you see in that mirror. Love your quirkiness. Love being different. Love being strange. Love being a visionary. Why? Because perfect practice or good practice makes perfect. The more you practice positive actions and attitudes within yourself, the easier it is over time. And so for me right now, it's really about waking up each morning, having a plan for what the day will be like, because the short-term focus is what feeds into the longer visions. So what I strive to do in terms of rituals, Trayshawn, I arise at a certain time each morning. I do certain rituals first thing in the morning, for example, exercise and so on. I eat a particular way because I want to nourish my temple. I think a particular way by feeding my mind with certain podcasts. I look at the persons around me who I admire. For example, yourself, your family. I go onto YouTube. Yes, I do, Trayshawn, believe it or not. Yes, right? Podcasts. I also enjoy reading the newspaper, the printed media, as well as online, and compare and contrast from my Twitter feed to my Instagram to a newspaper, the same story, to get different perspectives before coming to my own informed perspective. And so rituals, keeping family and friends close, and one of the principles of the Empowerment Master System that we use is called forgiveness of self. I have made a few mistakes in my life thus far, Trayshawn, and it's a human thing. What I am learning to do, however, is to not dwell on what I did, but learn the lesson from what happens to me or what I did, and allowing myself that level of space to forgive myself, to come to terms, to start the healing process.
Yeah.
It's, for example, Trayshawn, if you have a memory stick, a USB stick, and it has 3 gig of data capacity, if it reaches near its capacity, what do you have to do? You have to start to delete some of the memory to create more space. So it is with forgiveness of self. The more we load ourselves up and keep on dwelling on what could have gone wrong, what should have gone wrong, what we didn't do, what we failed to do, etc., these things become negative data in our minds, and how we think can impact or does impact how we act. And so I'm learning, and I say learning because it's still a work in progress. I'm learning to be more comfortable with that aspect of my healing and my growth, and working with it, rolling with it, because the world still evolves and the world still revolves and the earth doesn't stop spinning whether or not I have problems. So those two things are what I primarily do, and just give thanks for this special moment. So right now, being with you and your viewers in this format is the most important moment of my life, Trayshawn. It's being fully present at all times.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Trayshawn.
So now I'd like to ask you, let's say that you had a megaphone and you could say one thing to the world that would have a lasting impact. What would it be and why?
Trayshawn, I love your questions. You are forcing me to tap into my higher intelligence in answering you. My megaphone would say, be yourself. Be yourself. My reason for saying that is, as we mentioned earlier in the conversation, there was a time when I wasn't confident about who I am right now. The greatness was always there, but there was a disconnect between the fact that it was there and me knowing it was there. And so I would say, from the microphone in the metaphorical high place, be yourself. Embrace who you are. Stop trying to be a version of somebody else when you have your original prototype. That's what I would say. And on the back of that, when you are able to be comfortable in who you are, as you are, the world is forced to respect you for that. People may not like you for being different. People may be sliding up in your DM with negative comments. They may not want to like a few of your posts. They may try to avoid you. They may speak negatively about you. But that reflects their jealousy and their own inhibitions and lack of self-confidence that they try to project on you. And I know that for your audience, this may be a time in their lives, Trayshawn, when they are going through this whole range of hormonal changes, this plethora of emotions, of uncertainty, of wanting to be like somebody on Instagram, of wanting to be like the cool kid in school. I'm suggesting away with all of that. Embrace who you are, love it, understand what your gift is, then strive to monetize it. It's a very exciting time now for your audience, Trayshawn. And by association, for persons who are out of that target audience, as long as you're alive, strive to embrace who you are and be yourself. It is never too late to be that authentic version of who you always are. It's not arrogance, it's confidence. It's not negative, it's positive. Now is the time.
Thank you so much for sharing that, sir.
No, thank you, sir. Beautiful question.
I hope you guys have definitely had multiple forms of gratitude for all of these amazing points that Uncle Malik has shared so far. And I absolutely 100% agree with what Uncle Malik has said. Because it's all about learning to work with what you have and being fine where you are at. Because he who can manage little can manage lots. So it's about learning to work with what you have to create even more.
See, Trayshawn, I just love that energy you're giving right now in cyberspace because I am being truly inspired and taught by that. There's no ego involved here. I just happen to be on a further trajectory in the lifeline than many of the persons who tune into your podcast and your viewers. However, together, as I mentioned earlier, because we are interdependent, I strive to give the best of myself in this moment. And I'm certainly learning and being inspired and proud of this interaction with you and your listeners and viewers at this point in time. It's a really good experience. And I'm truly blessed to be here.
Thank you so much. So now I'd like you to share with the listeners if there's any advice that you would give to those who may have had their very own £1 million idea at a time like this.
As I mentioned earlier, I would say no hesitation. Start acting right now. So if you have your £1 million idea, the first thing I would suggest is write it down. Not tap it on your notepad, not put it on a Word document. Get a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper and write it down. And the reason why I suggest that you write it down is that there's a certain neurological, profound experience that happens when you physically transfer ideas from your mind through your hand onto a piece of paper. You are literally extracting it from your dynamic mind and putting it onto paper. You're making the thought flesh, the idea real and tangible. Secondly, start taking consistent steps to seeing that idea become a reality. And you do that by, first of all, looking, as we said earlier, at what you have at your disposal. So if you have an idea, however basic it might be, write it down, then look at how you can start that becoming a reality from where you are. Big trees come from small acorns. So yes, you have a vision of where you want to go, but you have to start going there in the first place. And there's a Chinese proverb, the longest journey begins with the first step. So start where you are. Then thirdly, be realistic and specific about what you want to do. You may want to be an astronaut and go to the moon. If you are struggling with basic mathematics, then there may be a problem. So start where you are. Write the idea down, start where you are, and take consistent action. Let me give you an example, Trayshawn. I do press-ups every morning as part of my daily routine. I meditate and I do light exercise, whether or not I go to the gym. When I first started doing my press-ups, Trayshawn, years ago, I couldn't do more than 10. Now I do way more than 10. This morning, for example, I was able to do 142 press-ups consecutively. And got up, took a deep breath, and felt good. Had a sip of water, and that was it, continued. What's my point? It is not to boast about my prowess in press-ups. The principle is, it took me committing myself to consistent steps, that 1, that 2, that 5 extra, over the years to reach this point now. And as it is with press-ups, as it is in going to the moon, as it is with your £1 million idea, small, consistent steps. As you know, Trayshawn, consistency, that's the key.
Definitely.
That's what I would suggest.
I 100% agree with that. And once again, I hope listeners are picking up on what Uncle Malik has to say.
Give thanks.
So what would you say is the biggest issue or problem that you are aiming to solve as an influencer in your niche market?
The biggest problem is the lack of, let me think carefully how I should word this. Many people suffer with self-confidence issues. Many of us are held back by the negative voices, not from outside ourselves, but from within ourselves, Trayshawn.
Yeah.
And so that negative internal dialogue is primarily the reason why many of us never do what we know deep inside we are capable of doing. And so that, I would say, is the major problem that we seek to solve. And this is why we are so effective, because not only do we use affirmations and mantras, but stepping into the 21st century, we look at the concept of self-empowerment, personal development, from a neurological perspective also. We look at it from a cellular level, because cells impact on the very basis of our humanity, how we therefore end up thinking. And so we get to the essence of that, and we strive to look at that area of higher intelligence within us on a cellular level, where even in the atom, we know that there's a space that cannot be defined. It simply is. So we aim to tap into that higher area of what Deepak Chopra refers to as conscience or higher consciousness. So from a cellular level, we apply neuroscience through our methodology of the Empowerment Master System, and we apply it in real time to the real lives of the persons that we deal with, so that their self-belief, their inner confidence can be strengthened in order for them to be who they are. We were born with certain gifts, with certain passions. We only have to do one thing well in this life, Trayshawn. Master one thing. And like the rays of the sun, all of the other things that we do will come onto us. So, for example, David Beckham, major footballer in his time. Many of us know David Beckham as a United Nations ambassador. We know him as a model. We know him as selling certain watches. He used the simple talent with the support of his dear wife, Victoria, and his team, but he used his simple talent of being a great footballer, did that, mastered it well, and then was able to monetize like the rays of the sun from his skill set. As in the life of David Beckham, so in the lives of you and I and your viewers and listeners. The science behind this just needs to be applied on an everyday basis. So rather than looking at celebrities for inspiration, sometimes we have to look around us and within us and bring out that natural talent and greatness that already permeates every cell in our being.
Oh my. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trish. Thank you.
So now I'd like to ask you, what would you say has been the so-called pivotal point along your journey, and what did it teach you?
As mentioned earlier, I strive to live in the present moments because, as Eckhart Tolle says in The Power of Now, he talks about or refers to the fact that everything happening in the present, it means as we are now having this discourse with the listeners and viewers, I'm thinking about growing up in Jamaica and my teacher, Miss Hilton, and my good friends, etc., that I grew up with in school, learning from that. I'm also thinking about what will happen towards the end of the year, but all of that is happening right now. So the pivotal moment, if you will, in my career is being right here now with you and the viewers and listeners. And I say that not to sound patronizing or cliched. I say that because in this moment, Trayshawn, someone may be listening to what we're saying and have the trigger for that £1 million idea. Yeah. Someone will listen to this exchange now in the future and look back to a time when there was an intergenerational conversation that took place between me and you, which shows the need to always have open conversations. Someone will be inspired by what I've said, something that you said, something that we have shared in this time. And so the pivotal part of my life is right now here with you.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank you for all your answers. They really do resonate deeply, and they really are major impacts. So I hope that you guys as listeners are taking notes. And also, if you can't take notes, just feel free to replay the podcast, and that way you can pick up any parts that you missed out on.
Indeed.
So what are the top 3 lessons that you have learned along your journey, and how did they influence the way that you look at life as a whole?
Top three lessons. 1, follow my gut, no distractions. 2, appreciate the love and support that's around me. 3, embrace my greatness. Embrace it. Be comfortable with it. It's fine. It's cool. It's okay to be me.
Yeah.
With all of my physical attributes, with all of my intellect, with all of my skill set, with all of my personality traits and quirks and mistakes and challenges. It's fine. Be at peace with me. And those 3 lessons have helped me to be a better person, to connect, for example, with persons like myself. If you can learn from some of the errors that I have made, then you make your own mistakes. They won't simply have to be the ones that I made. So you would be in an advantageous position because you'll be able to move more speedily with less hindrances to what you want to do. And that, in essence, is how I would address that question.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. It's always good to be here.
I definitely agree with those points, and it actually reminds me of a quote where
Yes.
I think it goes something like this: "The Messiah is not seen as the Messiah at his home,"
That's right.
and that is something that is often overlooked because people often show so much love and so much gratitude to all the people outside, but it's about the people behind closed doors who are putting in that work 24/7 to
That's right.
nurture you, to look after you, to help better you, to help grow you in many other ways beyond physical aspects as well.
True, true. And you remind me, just tag teaming on that observation that you made. Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley, from my native Jamaica, in one of his works, he says, a prophet has no honor in his own country,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes those with whom we associate fail to see our brilliance. And it takes, as you mentioned, someone from the outside. There are many artists, for example, I love jazz, Trey Sean. Jazz and coffee are two of my passions. And in the jazz world, many of the great jazz artists from the 50s and 60s, Miles Davis, Quincy Jones, etc., had to leave America and go to places like France or in Europe to be appreciated for their greatness,
Yes.
then to be re-imported into the American society as the giants in their fields. And little has changed in that regard, irrespective of our culture, our language, our racial background, political affiliation, sexual orientation. Little has changed in that regard, which is why we must always go within first. Embrace who we are, love who we are, and then represent that power, force, and dynamism to the world.
That's very powerful.
Oh, give thanks, give thanks.
So let's say that you had to be another person for one day. Who would it
Right,
be and why?
right. Trey Sean, you are forcing my mind to think. You're firing neurons in my brain. Who would I be and why for a day? Okay. I'm pausing because I'm thinking long and hard on this one.
Hmm.
Let me think, Trayshawn. Let me think on this. I will answer you before we finish here. But
Uh,
let me think about that. Who and why? Does it have to be someone who's living?
no. It's completely up to
No?
you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let me think on this and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Remind me before we finish, by the way, right?
Yes, I will. I will.
Make sure you're right. Okay, fine.
So now I'd like to ask you what your views are on the word legacy and what legacy you would like to leave.
Legacy means being remembered for at least one positive thing when I transcend this physical realm. I do not believe in death or life. It's simply a perpetuation of the life existence. We change forms like energy. And so, in this physical manifestation, when I depart this powerful frame, I would like to be remembered for at least one positive thing that I achieved in this world. And that will be done by my name being remembered by one or two persons who I had such a positive impact on. What I like my legacy to be is of a son of Africa who, via Jamaica, was able to, wherever he went throughout the world, he was able to impact the lives of those who appreciated him in a positive way. They felt loved by me, secured by me, and influenced by something I did in this life. That's what I'd like my legacy to be. So, in essence, I'd like my name to be remembered for some of the positive, influential things that I did in the lives of those individuals. So, it might be, Trey Sean, that 30 years, 40 years from now, you're with your grandchildren and your grandson does something and it reminds you of me.
Mm.
You may read something from one of my books You may look at a YouTube clip. We may look back at this moment and remember, oh yes, because I will transcend this flesh, but I'll never die. Because you remember me.
Yeah.
And so being remembered for at least one positive bit of influence is all I ask in this time. And that's, kind sir, is what I would love my legacy to be.
That is very powerful. And I totally agree with what you said, as a whole, really. And also what you said about transcending, and there's no such thing as death, because after all, we are energetic beings. And in science, I'm pretty sure that all of us are aware of the fact that energy can never be destroyed. It's merely transferred.
There you go. Trisha, this is so wonderful to hear you just giving me that perspective on this, you see, which is why we must have these kind of dialogues. I just thought of someone now, as you mentioned, about being someone for a day, and why. In Jamaica, there is a radio show host and a poet called Muta Baruka. And I say this humbly about wanting to be him for a day, because I am not worthy to walk in his shoes. And this is not based on me not being proud of who I am, but simply answering your question as directly as I can. The reason I admire Muta Baruka is that growing up in Jamaica, I was able to hear one of his poems for the first time when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And Trayshawn, when I heard his poem, I thought to myself, I would love to be able to be proud of myself in that way. This man to this day, Trayshawn, walks the earth barefooted. Now, I like shoes, okay? That's not what I'm advocating. He wears traditional attire. He is a proud Rastafarian. The lesson, which is why I would like to be him for a day, is authenticity. He was clear about who he was. I've been a vegan now for 30 years. And part of the reason why I embraced veganism was a seed that was planted from him. So before being plant-based, Trayshawn became a hashtag. Before clean living became a trend, I heard about it first as an 11 or 12-year-old in high school in Jamaica, directly from Muta Baruka. And so why I admire him is because of him being so authentic, being clear about who he was and who he is and what he stood for and what he stands for. And history has proven, Trayshawn, that he was not this silly Rasta man walking around with delusions of grandeur. History has validated his stance and the stance of Rastafarians on the vegan lifestyle, on the concept of God being within you, of the power being within, not without. And so my work, in many ways, mirrors that, because I have been influenced. I do it in my unique way. So for example, when I was doing my hair this morning, Trayshawn, right? What you realize is that it didn't take me as long to get it done. As I was doing my hair, what I realized, Trayshawn, is that doing the same thing your way is very important. There is nothing new under the sun. What's different is the unique interpretation that you bring to the same thing. And so I would say Muta Baruka for those reasons, and I must add a disclaimer that it is not me trying to be like him or in any way trying to walk in his shoes. I'm very comfortable and proud of the man that I'm evolving to become. However, as we mentioned earlier, interdependence. We have to pay homage to those who have paved the way for us before. And that is the reason why in this hypothetical example, I would use him. I trust that answers the question for you and the viewers and listeners, Trayshawn. I had to think deeply about that for obvious reasons.
Can you
I
hear?
cannot hear you,
Oh,
your invitation. Yes, I can hear you now.
oh, I'm not sure what happened there. Yes, definitely. I totally understand why you selected that powerful individual, and thank you so much for sharing.
Give thanks. Give thanks.
So could you share some advice with those who are listening, who may be starting something new and are starting to give up?
As long as you wake up each morning and you go to bed each night and you wake up the following morning and that interest, that idea, that thought is still in your mind, you still have a passion for it, continue. You may have to redefine your methodology because what you have been doing has not given you the reasonable results that you expected. So you need to recalibrate, but keep going. And I mention it that way, Trishan, because in my industry, in the self-empowerment industry, in the personal development industry, there is a mantra that if at first you don't succeed, try again. I think that's utter rubbish. There comes a point, Trishan, where if you're not getting the results, you need to stop. You may need to recalibrate. You may need to find another road. You may need to find another interest because it's just not working. However, if after your disappointment, after your frustration, you still have that burning in your soul, you still have that thought in your mind, you're watching a movie and all you can see is your idea in some shape or form. You're out with your friends, you're having a drink, you're eating some food, you're sitting in a pizza parlor and the idea comes through again in some shape or form. If that burning desire, Trayshawn, and viewers and listeners, is still inside of you, then find another way.
Mm.
So what I simply have to listen to that voice inside of you. Trust your gut. Trust yourself. Because many of the great inventions in this world, when the Wright brothers in the early 20th century looked at the first single engine plane, Trayshawn, and thought about the fact that we may be able to fly in the sky like birds, they were laughed at. If there was Instagram in that time, there would be all sorts of memes, Trayshawn, about how crazy these are. But look now, Trayshawn, we think automatically about going on an airplane. Nothing of it. But in that time, just over 100 years ago, it was considered crazy, mad, weird. But crazy, mad, weird is good. Being different is good. Being authentic is important. Trust yourself. As long as you hear that voice in your head, as long as you have that burning in your heart, continue. No longer hear that voice. You no longer feel that burning. Then you simply transfer the lessons learned to another area and keep going until you find that area, that talent, that gift you have. You only need one. Then you monetize and you live a very comfortable life financially.
Yes, I totally agree with what you just said there.
Give thanks.
And
Give thanks.
it actually reminded me of something. I think it was
Yes.
only yesterday someone told me this. So before Bill Gates had actually founded Microsoft, he went to several, I think it was hundreds of people, and he only needed 11 of those people to start his company. So it's not about having the biggest following or having the most likes and all of that. It's about having those key fundamental people in place who can help support you to achieve your dream.
There you go, Trisha. Which goes back to our earlier point in the conversation about the love and support and appreciating it. There you go. That's a perfect example, Trisha. I don't need to add anything more to that answer. Thank you, kind sir.
Thank you. So now I'd like to ask you if there's any words of advice that you would like to leave with the listeners.
Well, I'd first like to thank them for tuning in live or whenever they watch this recording. And I would strongly suggest that after watching this recording, that they simply spend 10 minutes just thinking about their lives so far. Doesn't matter whether you're 10 or 100. Just spend 10 minutes by yourself and just think about 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for. And then think about what you want to do with your future, irrespective of your age, right? Think about what you're grateful for and think about what you want to do in your future. Then get to work, because time waits for none of us. This earth, we come and we see it, we will leave it after playing our part, and then we transition into another life form. So time is precious. Think about, I would implore listeners to think about how precious this moment is right now in life. Trisha, there was a time when I was your age, and I had difficulties thinking about the fact that people would live as long as I have now right now, because it seemed virtually impossible. I mentioned to you earlier about being in high school, and my dearest friend then, who is still my best friend now, when we were told at 11, 12 years old that we would graduate and have to work one day and graduate within 5 years, I asked him, Trayshawn, in assembly, if people live that long. I couldn't fathom 5 years from then, or 10 years from then. Well, my dear Trayshawn listeners and viewers, 5 years have come and gone. 10 years have come and gone. 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, right? I'll stop there. My point is this: you live long enough, the time will come. So what we have right now, Trayshawn, and we do this with our early years program, as we do with our senior citizens, with the Empowerment Master System. What we have right now is what's important. Value this very moment. And so I would therefore suggest, in essence, to your listeners and viewers, spend 10 minutes after watching this recording, think about something you want to do in your future, appreciate the support system you have around you right now, because what you do not have doesn't matter. What you have is what matters. And trust yourself. Love what you see, because this life is a beautiful one. Make the best of it. That's what I would humbly suggest. And as I'm saying this to the listeners and viewers, I'm saying it to myself, Trayshawn, because it's a cycle of development. We are all works in progress, irrespective of where we are in the trajectory of life.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I hope that you listeners have gained so much from Uncle Malik today. And also thank you so much to you, Uncle Malik, for coming on to the Influencer Show today.
Trayshawn, it's been an honor, and I thank you and the viewers for this opportunity. And I truly appreciate and I'm humbled by the invitation. I do not take it for granted, and I am eternally grateful to you.
Thank you so much. And also thank you to you listeners. For those of you who didn't quite catch anything that we were talking about, feel free to rewind it so that you can then not miss out on any important information that we have spoken about today. And thank you so much to you listeners for listening in this podcast. There's going to be loads more on the Influencer Show. And if you too would like to have the chance to be featured on the Influencer Show, be sure to email the email that's going to be popping up on the screen, and you could have your chance to be interviewed on the Influencer Show. And before we leave, I'd like you, Uncle Malik, to leave any information that for people to contact you for any upcoming things you may have.
Sure. My website is malikmuhammad.com. That's MalikMuhammad, A for Apple, D for Derek.com. Instagram is Malik Muhammad 8. And Twitter is, my Twitter handler is @ThoughtExchange. LinkedIn, Malik Muhammad. If you missed any of that, simply go to my website, malikmuhammad.com, and you'll find all the information there, including a direct telephone number.
once again, thank you so much to yourself, Uncle Malik, and to the listeners. And I hope you guys have a great day. That's it from me.
Give thanks. Blessings. Give thanks.